The worst thing about being lost isn't the distance from safety. It's being close enough to hear people looking and knowing they can't hear you back. Welcome to Episode 4 of Gary Deep Woods Horror Stories. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a like so you never miss the next episode. Distance doesn't always measure in miles, and sometimes 10 minutes of walking is the same as forever. October 2015, Western Maine, 2 miles off the Appalachian Trail corridor where the forest gets dense enough to erase visibility past 15 feet. I was running property survey lines for a timber company, moving through old-growth sections that don't see human traffic outside through hiking season, when I saw fabric that didn't belong. Blue tarp, faded and torn, draped between 2 trees like someone had built shelter and left it standing. My partner checked the survey records for marked campsites or trail maintenance structures in this grid section. Nothing documented, nothing on the maps, no reason for anyone to have built anything this far off established trails. We approached slowly because you don't walk into someone's camp without announcing yourself first, even when the camp looks abandoned enough to have ghosts. I called out twice and got nothing back except wind through the canopy overhead. The tarp was anchored with stones and deadfall branches, edges weighted deliberately to prevent weather from tearing it loose. Underneath was a sleeping bag still arranged on a foam pad, a backpack with items visible through the open top, personal effects laid out neatly like someone had organized them and never came back to retrieve what they'd carefully arranged. What was found was positioned on the sleeping bag, like someone had lain down to rest and simply stopped. Skeletal remains, clothing intact, no visible trauma, no scattering from animal activity. Just the stillness of someone who'd been there so long the forest had started reclaiming the space around them without disturbing what they'd left behind. I stepped back, told my partner to hike out for signal and contact authorities, stayed with the site because you don't leave discoveries like this unattended even when everything in you wants to walk away and pretend you never saw it. While I waited, I studied the camp without touching anything, trying to understand what the arrangement was telling me. The tarp was positioned to funnel rainwater into one corner for collection. The sleeping bag was high quality, insulated for cold weather, placed on a pad that kept it elevated from ground moisture. The backpack contained first aid supplies, a headlamp, organized clothing, the inventory of someone who knew what they were doing and had done it correctly. A notebook sat beside the sleeping bag, cover warped from moisture but intact, writing visible through the transparent pocket showing someone had used it extensively. I didn't touch it, but I could see pen marks, entries, dates, the evidence of documentation. 20 feet from the tarp, I found a clearing where branches had been arranged in a massive X pattern on the ground. Deliberate construction, visible from directly above, the universal signal for distress that pilots and search crews are trained to recognize. The branches were covered in moss now, weathered gray, but the pattern still held its shape after however long they'd been there. 30 feet in another direction, I found fabric strips tied to branches at eye level, colors faded to almost nothing but still positioned to catch attention from anyone walking past at human height. This wasn't someone who'd gotten injured and couldn't move. This was someone who'd survived long enough to build signals, to set up camp properly, to wait for rescue they believed was coming, and never stopped trying to make themselves visible. Authorities arrived 3 hours later, processed everything, removed what was found along with all belongings for identification. I provided GPS coordinates, showed them the signal markers, gave my statement about discovery conditions and site layout. One of the state officers checked my coordinates against something on his device, looked at me, asked if I knew how far the Appalachian Trail was from this location. I checked my GPS and told him probably half a mile, maybe slightly less. His expression changed in a way I recognized as confirmation of something he'd already suspected but hoped wasn't true. 2 weeks later, the investigation office called, asked if I'd review findings and verify details about what I'd discovered. I went to their office expecting routine follow-up, sat down with the lead investigator, and he showed me the identification results. Geraldine Largay, 66, experienced long-distance hiker, reported missing July 2013 while through hiking the Appalachian Trail northbound. Last confirmed sighting at a trail shelter, intending to continue toward her next resupply point 20 miles north. When she didn't arrive on schedule, her husband reported her gone, and the search operation that followed was one of the largest in Maine's history for a missing hiker. Navy SEALs deployed, search dogs brought in, volunteer teams numbering in the hundreds, helicopters with thermal imaging, ground crews covering every mile of trail and adjacent forest in expanding radius patterns. Weeks of intensive searching found nothing, and eventually the operation scaled back to periodic monitoring and occasional sweeps when new information suggested areas to recheck. She'd been missing 26 months when I found the camp, 2 years and 2 months of being gone while her family waited for answers that didn't come until a surveyor stumbled across fabric that shouldn't have been there. The investigator opened a folder, showed me the journal that had been preserved as evidence, every page photographed and transcribed. He asked if I wanted to read the entries, said it might provide context for what I'd found. I said yes because saying no felt like abandoning her a second time. The first entry was dated July 22, 2013, handwriting clear and steady with no distress evident in the formation. I stepped off trail briefly and can't find my way back. I've been walking for 2 hours searching. I'm going to stay in one place now and wait for help. The words were calm, practical, the decision of someone who understood wilderness survival protocol. Stay put, make yourself visible, conserve resources. Wait for the search teams you know will come because you're an experienced hiker on a popular trail, and people will notice when you don't arrive. She'd done everything exactly right from the first moment. The entries that followed documented her setup, constructing the shelter, building the branch X, hanging fabric markers, rationing the food she had, filtering water from a stream she'd located nearby. Day 3, helicopters overhead today. I waved my arms and my bright jacket. They didn't see me through the canopy. I'll try again tomorrow. Day 5, more helicopters. I can hear them clearly. The branch X is in the clearing where they should see it. I'm staying hopeful. Day 7, I think I heard voices today south of camp. I tried to yell, but my voice won't carry far enough through the dense growth. The forest swallows sound. Day 9, helicopters came very close. I waved and screamed. They passed overhead without stopping. I don't understand why the signals aren't working. The handwriting remained steady through the first 2 weeks, entries methodical and optimistic, documenting attempts to make contact and unwavering belief that rescue would arrive soon. Day 15, getting weak now. I've rationed everything as carefully as possible. I tried to walk toward where the trail should be, but became disoriented quickly and returned to camp. Protocol says stay in one place. I'm following protocol. Day 18, I heard voices again today, very close this time, close enough to make out some words. I screamed until my throat went raw and my voice broke. They didn't hear me. How can they be that close and the sound not reach them? Day 21, the helicopters haven't returned. I don't know if they've stopped searching or moved to different areas. I'm very weak. Standing makes me dizzy. I keep trying to signal, but I don't think anyone is looking here anymore. After day 21, the entries shortened, handwriting beginning to deteriorate, letters less controlled, words sometimes trailing into illegibility. Day 23, so cold, can't get warm even in the bag, tried to signal. No one came. Day 25, I think this might be the end. I tried everything. I'm sorry I couldn't make it back. Day 26, the final entry carried a date but only a few words, handwriting barely recognizable, pen strokes weak and wandering across the page. When you find me, please tell them it wasn't painful at the end. Just cold. Just quiet. Nothing after that, the rest of the journal pages blank. The investigator gave me time to sit with that before continuing, his voice careful when he spoke again. The phone had been recovered, still in her pocket, battery depleted years ago. When they charged it and accessed the data, they found text messages, dozens of them. Every single one marked as failed to send, every attempt to reach out falling into the void of no signal coverage. The messages carried timestamps showing when each attempt was made throughout the 26 days. July 23, I'm off the trail and can't find my way back. Please send help. I'm okay, but I'm lost. July 25, still here. I can hear helicopters, but they can't see me through the trees. I'm trying to signal. Please keep looking. July 28, nearly a week now. Food running low. Please help me. I'm getting scared. August 2, I know you're searching. I can hear you. I'm trying to scream, but you're not hearing me. Please don't stop. August 8, I don't think I'm going to make it out. I tried everything I knew. I love you all. Every message typed carefully with cold fingers into a device that showed no signal, sending them anyway because what else do you do when you need someone to know where you are, and the technology that's supposed to connect you to the world has become useless? The investigator said the search operation had been extensive, professional, one of the largest deployments Maine had coordinated for a single missing hiker. They'd covered the trail corridor completely, walked the adjacent forest in grid patterns, checked every logical area she could have reached on foot in the time frame before she would have stopped moving. Search dogs had worked the area, helicopters had flown overhead with thermal imaging, ground teams had moved through the forest calling her name and listening for response. They'd come within 200 yards of her campsite on multiple occasions. Close enough that she'd heard them, heard the helicopters clearly, heard voices carrying through the trees. Close enough that she'd screamed herself raw, trying to make them hear her back. But the forest density swallowed sound in ways that made distance irrelevant. Made 200 yards the same as 2 miles. Made the gap between her and the searchers unbridgeable even when they were close enough that different wind conditions might have carried her voice to them. The signals she'd constructed were visible from directly above, but canopy coverage was thick enough that helicopter crews scanning for bright colors or movement patterns couldn't distinguish the faded tarp and weathered branch X through layers of green. She'd been 2,700 feet from the trail. Half a mile, a 10-minute walk in open terrain. Close enough that on still nights, she might have heard voices from other thru-hikers camped on the trail, cooking dinner, laughing, completely unaware that someone was within earshot trying not to disappear. She survived 26 days doing everything survival protocol demands: shelter, water, signals, staying put, conserving energy, waiting for rescue. And it wasn't enough because the gap between where she was and where people were searching was just wide enough that it couldn't be crossed. The investigator asked if I had questions, his tone suggesting he knew I would. I asked why the search teams didn't locate her if they came that close, if the coverage was as thorough as the records indicated. He explained the forest density in that region reduces visibility to 15 or 20 feet in most sections. Search grids have spacing intervals that balance thoroughness against the reality of limited time and personnel. The spacing was calculated to catch someone moving or actively signaling, but by the second week she was too weak to move much, and her signals were stationary, designed for aerial visibility, less effective for ground teams moving laterally through undergrowth. She was in a gap between the search lines, a space that should have been covered but wasn't because you can't physically search every square foot of hundreds of square miles. The mathematics don't support it, the resources don't exist, the timeline doesn't allow it. So gaps remain, small spaces where someone can be and not be found. And she was in one of those spaces for 26 days while people searched everywhere except the precise location where she'd stopped moving. I asked if the journal explained why she didn't attempt to walk toward the sounds she was hearing. He said multiple entries addressed that exact question. She'd wanted to move toward helicopters and voices, but was afraid of becoming more disoriented, of leaving the camp and the signals she'd invested so much effort into constructing, of not surviving the attempt to move when staying put was what every protocol instructed her to do. She made the correct decision based on wilderness survival training. The problem was that rescue came close but not close enough, and staying put meant staying in the gap where no one was looking at that exact moment. I requested to see the text messages again, asked if I could read through all of them. The investigator pulled up the transcription file, turned the screen toward me. 47 messages total, spanning from day 1 through day 26, each one marked "failed to send" in red text. Some were long, detailed descriptions of her location relative to landmarks she could see. Some were short pleas for help. Some were messages to family members telling them she loved them and was trying to get back. The final message was timestamped August 17, no 9:23 hours. "I'm not going to make it. I tried everything. I wasn't careless. Please don't think I was careless. The forest just wouldn't let me find the trail again. Failed to send." Typed into a phone with no signal, the words going nowhere, the plea falling into silence. I asked when she didn't survive when the end came. The investigator said the final journal entry was day T26, which aligned with the final text message timestamp. Medical analysis suggested another 2 to 4 days of declining consciousness after the last documented entries. Gradual shutdown as hypothermia and starvation completed what 26 days of exposure had initiated. The investigation concluded she'd stepped off trail briefly, become disoriented in forest with no distinct landmarks, made the decision to stay put rather than risk walking farther in the wrong direction, and survived nearly a month waiting for rescue that passed close enough to hear, but not close enough to make contact. The outcome was determined to be exposure and starvation, slow decline over the final week as resources depleted and cold temperatures extracted what remained. The timeline indicated she was likely still conscious during some of the later search sweeps, still in camp, still aware, growing weaker but able to hear helicopters and possibly voices from ground teams moving through adjacent areas, which means searchers walked past while she was there, alive, listening to them move through the forest just far enough away that sound couldn't bridge the distance between them. I asked if there was any way to know if she heard them on the final day, if she lost consciousness knowing they'd stopped searching, or if she slipped away still believing the next helicopter might see her Branch X. The investigator said the journal doesn't indicate that. The final entry's too brief and deteriorated to show what her mental state was in those last hours. Just fragments about cold and weakness and apology. I went back to the discovery site months later, needed to see it again with full knowledge of what had happened there. The evidence team had removed everything, the tarp, the remains, the personal belongings, but the forest held the shape of what had been. The Branch X was still there in the clearing, mostly decomposed but still holding pattern. The fabric strips still hung from the tree, colors completely gone now, just gray threads moving in wind. I stood where the camp had been and listened to what she would have heard. Birds calling, wind through canopy, the distant sound of a small aircraft passing over at high altitude. No voices, no helicopters, nothing human except me standing in a place where someone had spent 26 days alone waiting to be found. I checked my GPS for the trail location, 2,609 feet west-northwest. I walked toward it, counting time, pushing through dense undergrowth and navigating deadfall. 8 minutes brought me to the trail, clear and well-maintained, packed earth showing recent foot traffic. I stood on the trail and turned to look back toward where I'd come from. Couldn't see anything, couldn't see the clearing, couldn't see the tree with the fabric markers, couldn't see any indication that anything existed beyond the wall of green. The forest had closed completely, erasing any visual connection between the trail and what lay just 8 minutes away. I tried to imagine stepping off this trail for any reason and trying to find it again without clear landmarks or sight lines. The forest looked uniform in every direction, trees identical, no distinguishing features, no way to navigate except by compass or GPS, neither of which help when you're disoriented and moving in the wrong direction grows the distance faster than you realize. She'd been that close for 26 days. Close enough to hear helicopters with enough clarity to know they were searching. Close enough to hear voices and try to scream back. Close enough that a 10-minute walk in the correct direction would have brought her back to the trail and people and survival. But she didn't know which direction was correct. And walking the wrong way meant not surviving while moving instead of not surviving while following protocol. So she stayed, built signals, rationed resources, wrote in her journal, typed messages into a phone that couldn't send them, and waited for rescue she could hear but couldn't reach. And the rescue teams walked past, close enough that sound almost carried, but not close enough that it did. I think about the journal entry from day 18, the one where she said she heard voices close enough to distinguish some words. I think about her screaming until her voice broke, believing that if she just made enough noise, the sound would carry the 200 yards to where the searchers were moving through the forest calling her name. I think about the searchers moving past, calling out, listening for response, hearing nothing back because the forest swallowed her voice before it could travel far enough to matter. I think about how close doesn't mean saved, how proximity doesn't guarantee contact, how you can be within reach of rescue and still be unreachable. The distance was 2,700 feet for 26 days, and she never stopped trying to cross it, and it never got smaller. If you could hear voices close enough to make out words, and you screamed until your throat bled but the forest swallowed the sound, and you knew rescue was 10 minutes away in a direction you couldn't identify, does proximity make hope possible, or does it make every passing day unbearable? Subscribe if that follows you. Hit the bell. Leave a like if this stays with you. Some people get close enough to hear rescue coming and never close enough to be heard back.